Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite show on all social media and entertainment platforms. Garbage Time Takes, back with another episode, your weekly Thursday episode. As always, I am Derek here with my co-host Dennis
True, baby.
and Bob, who has blessed us with a new background.
Well, I think we'll get to it later, but I wanted to make sure that the Cincinnati Bengals were represented on this podcast.
That's too soon, man.
So
That's
How
too
kind
soon.
of-
we'll
Right
get
off the
that
gate, are you
later.
serious?
We'll get that later.
Right off the gate, we're gonna have a whole segment on that. Come on, man.
Yeah. How kind of you, Bob. We'll never forget.
Inclusive.
For those of you who have been living under a rock this week, the sports world has been pretty much set ablaze with all sorts of news, from basketball to football to even hockey. But the thing I want to start out with might be the most important news of the day, and this is one I haven't told my co-hosts about. Bobrovski has officially retired from officiating college basketball games.
Goodness, I knew there was gonna be a surprise.
So
and
Michigan's
that's not
basically
what I
a
expected.
shoe-in for Big Ten champion. Then is what I'm hearing.
Don't forget MSU. Bobrovski shafts MSU like every single time he officiates them. Bobrovski, known shafter of Big Ten teams, fraudulent referee who has somehow officiated multiple Final Fours, is finally doing everybody in the Big Ten a favor by leaving the game. Thank you, Bobrovski, for your
How many
service.
years
Any
did he
thoughts?
officiate the Big Ten? How many years?
Oh, that is a
Any idea?
great question, Dennis.
A chronic
Probably
state of
many.
Michigan basketball screwer, Bobrovsky. I mean,
20 years, Dennis. 20 years.
20 years of just torment.
I don't know how many
teams in the
times I
Big
saw
Ten. That's horrible.
Derek spiking pencils, head and hands over the calls of none other than Bobrovsky. He'd always come into our main area and say, "Boys, Bobrovsky's reffing tonight. We're in for a long one." And
It's over.
Correct.
and I would say similar things. However, Derek was always paying attention to who the refs were, so I got to give him credit there.
Let's not forget the terrible trio of Bobrovsky, what's his face? DJ Karstensen.
Yep.
And, Courtney, what's his last name?
Green.
Courtney Davis or something like that. Either way, the terrible trio that is those three has finally lost one of their members. So thank you, Bo, for your 20 years of ineptitude.
See ya.
And for those of you who aren't aware, last offseason, a petition went viral for the removal of Bobrovsky as a Big Ten official. And of the 5,000 signatures it hoped to gain, it got 4,496. So there's a very strong contingent of Big Ten fans and probably national basketball fans who thought Bobrovsky was a detriment to college basketball. So thank you, Bo, and goodbye. But I just wanted to lead off with
When
something
you're
unexpected.
official and everybody knows your name, that's not a good thing. That's never a good
Correct.
thing.
Correct, Dennis. Just how it applies to baseball umpires, college basketball
Yes.
officials are no different. Unless your name is Gene Steratore or Ed Hockley. Those are two names of guys.
That's
that are-
true. I definitely or
NFL
Sean Hockley
officials-
now.
Yeah, NFL officials seem to be like the outlier where, like, if you know an NFL official's name, chances are they're probably good. Unless you're like Jerome Boger or something like that.
Or they're fun to laugh at. Like I always
Correct.
laughed at Sean Hockley because he's just out there flexing while he's making calls.
Correct.
You're either good at what you do or you're hilarious to watch. One of the two.
100%. But yeah, just want to lead off with something unexpected before we get into the real big news. As of, hour and a half ago, the Boston Celtics head coach, Bob Ime Udoka, did I pronounce that correctly, has been suspended for a full year for an improper consensual relationship with a female Boston Celtics staffer. This is coming off the heels of an NBA Finals appearance for Boston. And to get a full year when DeSean Watson only got 10 games for non-consensually, touching 25 women. Bob, what are your thoughts? Did Ime Udoka mess with a big dog's wife? Is that what happened here?
I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see on the details. But from what I've seen from other sports networks, from insiders, that there was some serious violations that occurred, and I think this is a very slippery slope. And although it was a consensual relationship, workplace relationships can always tend to get a little bit messy, especially when there could be a power dynamic involved with somebody as prominent as a head coach of a franchise.
Correct.
And so I think the Boston Celtics acted promptly, and as soon as the news broke, they were on it. And so I guess I'll commend them for that. However, this is a pretty sizable blow in my mind to the actual chances of the Celtics this year. Now, I didn't have them. I mean, we'll talk more about NBA when it gets to that point. However, I'm not really that high on the Celtics this year, but they performed well last year. And Ime was definitely. I think it's hard to ignore that he was a catalyst for some of their success, and especially their defensive identity as a former player himself. So big blow to the Celtics, but I think it's an interesting point that you brought up there. I wonder if the NFL is going to get some backlash for that, because this wasn't even the NBA league wasn't even investigating this. This was purely in an investigation,
an organizational level,
and an organizational handed down penalty, because it was only an organizational policy that was broken, but still a harsh suspension. And I even saw reports that they'll be considering whether they're going to retain him as a coach at a later time. So not even guaranteed, I guess, that he even returns to see the court again as the head coach. I mean, I'm pretty sure he will, but I mean, it's, if I had to guess, but it's not a good look, and not a good look for the NFL, and not a good look for Ime. I'll say that much.
And there's no guarantee that Ime decides to stick through a suspension. I mean, there's nothing, holding him back from resigning and then potentially finding another head coaching job, because what he did with the Celtics doesn't pertain to the NBA as a whole. So
correct.
Certainly an interesting situation, Dennis. No, you're not really a big NBA guy, so I don't know if you have any thoughts, but maybe you got anything?
No, not something I was following too closely, but I will say that it seemed pretty prompt and immediate, which, as you pointed out, does bring a bit of intrigue into the NFL's handling of DeSean Watson. And, Boston was pretty prompt, it felt like.
Did you think a year was too long?
I'll say that.
I didn't think it was gonna be a year. When I heard them talking, I heard up to a year were the earliest reports, and I was like, probably half the season maybe, but a whole year. I mean they're not leaving
it must
any.
Have been something pretty significant.
I think that's the key, because from what I was hearing from other kind of like insiders, they kind of alluded to it, that there was a lot more behind the scenes that hasn't really came out yet, and when it does, they'll speak on it more. But I don't know. I think a year's appropriate, and the one thing's for sure is the Boston Celtics aren't leaving any room for speculation on that front.
Yeah.
They're dropping the hammer, and they're dropping it hard.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if a Celtics staffer gets paid a handsome sum of money by some big time media outlet to get the name of the other individual involved. But I have no grounds to speculate on that. But I won't be surprised if in a week or two we get who is actually there. Other NBA news: Robert Sarver, Bob, selling the Phoenix Suns after the investigation into the Phoenix organization right in my backyard. Some pretty, misogynistic and egregiously, harmful and toxic comments he made. So it's a little bit of old news, but just figured I'd bring it up since we're on the NBA. Do we have enough money with the three of us to be able to buy the Suns, maybe?
I think if we could recruit, if we got us three and Jeff Bezos, we might have it. But I hear he's interested in buying the team anyway.
I'll reach out to the Hollings program and see what we can come up with.
Dennis,
we got money tied up there, and that could be a good portion. And then if you guys can toss in a few milli or something, I mean, maybe we can get there.
Sure, I'm sure I can scrounge it up. I mean, it'd be easy operations because Phoenix is only 2 hours away, and I'm sure I could work remotely. So, it's
We got Derek right there at the headquarters, and it's all set up.
correct.
Get out of the lab benches and get to the basketball courts because it's time
That's
to run.
right,
It's time to run a
That's right.
franchise.
That's right, dang it. But yeah, no real surprises there that, after LeBron and CP3 were like, this is garbage after the whole, Donald Sterling thing, that they were like, yeah, we're not going to really, punish Robert Sarver that much. So a lot of pressure on Robert Sarver, and I think it's the right thing for him to sell the team.
Well, I mean, you guys, hopefully some of our podcast listeners that don't have a short memory will remember, but the NBA commissioner's first act when he came in, that was basically the first thing that he did was remove Donald Sterling. Basically forced him to sell the team, and then so I guess I was a little surprised that he didn't come out and that harshly this time, but I mean, I guess it's all working out anyway,
right?
But
yeah, all's well that ends well.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I get your point. And then the only other NBA news I had, the Detroit Pistons fleecing the Utah Jazz today, Bob. What a Troy Weaver mastermind picking up Bojan Bogdanovic, 40% three-point shooter, going to help the Pistons space the floor for Kelly Olynyk and Saban Lee. I mean, Bob, is highway robbery a word that can even describe how big of a fleecing this was?
This tells me either one of two things. Either Troy Weaver's got some blackmail on somebody that we don't know about, or the trade market for Bogdanovic was dried up. But it really didn't seem so. I mean, every single team that needed a player, that was always a guy that was brought up. And it seemed like a lot of teams were interested because, like you mentioned, great counting stats, a veteran of the league. And the fact that we were able to land him for a bag of chips when we already have,
a bag of chips and a waterlogged golf ball.
I mean, Kelly Olynyk wasn't seeing the floor that much. And we could sign somebody to replace a center. I already thought we had too many centers anyway.
We already have a log.
I already thought we had
a log jam.
That's what I thought, But
so that's why it made sense to move Kelly. I mean, we have Jalen Duren, who's going to need minutes, Marvin Bagley, who's going to need minutes, Nerlens Noel. We had a logjam at the Isaiah Stewart beef stew.
But what is I don't see in any sense of the word where Utah is getting anything out of this. I don't know. Their team that's in basically a full rebuild. So why would they at least want a couple second rounders or something?
I think Kelly Olynyk played for Danny Ainge in Boston.
That's true, but come on.
But also, it might be that Danny Ainge has been fleecing everyone with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, that he needed to make a bad trade to be able to get other
his
NBA
reputation back,
to trust him again. So maybe Danny Ainge is going full big brain, mega.
We're playing chess out here. We're not checkers. We're playing chess. That's
correct.
What it sounds like.
But I love that move for Detroit because they have three options. One, they're pushing for one of those bottom half play-in spots for the playoffs. Two, if they're out of contention early on and by the deadline, they can probably flip him for a first-round pick to a desperate contender. And three, if they decide to keep him around, they have more than enough money to extend him for another couple years and maybe make him, a key role player as the team develops. So, not mad. Troy Weaver mastermind, Utah Jazz social media was in shambles. All I saw on Twitter was Jazz fans saying, surely there's a first-round pick in there somewhere. But Troy Weaver doesn't just toss around first-round picks. Correct. The only other thing on that, Bob, is it a big L for the Lakers? Because the Jazz were trying to get 2 first-round picks to take on Russell Westbrook's contract, and the Lakers, they wouldn't budge. So, as the resident Lakers fan on this podcast and resident LeBron James fan, first and foremost, did the Lakers fumble the bag?
No, because I think the Lakers are not going to give up that second first-round pick. That's just I think that would have come down to at the end of the day. And if I think their sights are set right now on Indiana more than anything. I think they're trying to bring in Miles Turner more than anything, and the other player I'm forgetting his name, but also from Indiana. But they have even been reluctant to give up the second first round pick for those two players, and so they're most certainly not going to give it up for Bogdanovich. So, I mean, it hurts, yes, because I would like to see it'd be a nice addition, but I mean, clearly it was the Lakers, and then there was nobody else because now it's from maybe a first round pick in Russell Westbrook to Kelly Olynyk and Saban Lee. So,
I mean, just another Troy Weaver masterclass. Had to give the Pistons GM some props. All Troy Weaver does is make winning moves.
That's right.
I mean, he essentially turned Jeremy Grant into Jalen Duren, a first-round pick, a bunch of money from the Knicks in picks, and now Bojan Bogdanovic, because moving Jeremy Grant brought in Jalen Duren to give us an amount of big men to be able to move Kelly. I mean, I'm sure there are more moves coming. Troy Weaver's got more up his sleeve. Other news, Zdeno Chara, PK Subban, Keith Yandel retired. I know we don't really talk much NHL on here, but for the puckheads who do listen to us, just wanted to pay my respects as a hockey fan. Dennis, I know you watch a little bit of hockey with the Blue Jackets, and I'm sure you very much know the name Zdeno Chara at least.
Of course, and Subban, of course, because he was with the Preds for a while. Is that correct? When they won the Stanley Cup, or at least when they were in the Stanley Cup, and so yeah, I mean, those are definitely all three names that I recognize. Don't know too much about them. I enjoy watching hockey when the Stanley Cup comes around, though, for sure.
Yeah,
that's playoff hockey. Nothing better.
But yeah, mad respect to the man who, for the longest time, had the hardest slap shot in the league, Zdeno Chara. NFL news. Joe Hayden retired. Dennis, I'm sure you're thrilled to see that as he terrorized you as both a Brown and a Steeler for many years.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I thought he was retired already. That dude's old as snot, man. That guy has been around the block. But he did terrorize us over and over and over again with Cleveland and with Pittsburgh. I forgot about Pittsburgh. Yeah, I was me and Bobby were talking pre-show about the list of names we were going to talk about today, and I was like, Joe Hayden, man, he was in Cleveland forever, just absolutely great player, but he was in Pittsburgh as well. That it's good news for everybody else in the North.
Yeah, definitely. Cole Beasley signed with the Bucks. I didn't even realize he was still a free agent. I could have sworn he was still in Buffalo, and to see that Cole Beasley is randomly signing with Tampa Bay since this perfect segue. I'm real good at this. The Mike Evans suspension was upheld, the 1-game suspension against Green Bay, so that'll make things interesting. Tampa Bay, was a little thin with Chris Godwin still hurt. Now Mike Evans suspended, so why not bring in another short slot white wide receiver for Brady to throw to, right?
Yeah, right next to good old Scotty Miller, who's been carrying the load. I mean, I was talking to Dennis about this pre-show. I said, Tom Brady is going to have to throw to 3 guys from Tallahassee this week to try to get the job done against the bad man Aaron Rodgers. But no, it's
all that Julian Edelman was a little upset he didn't get a call. I think I saw that somewhere. Is it?
But I saw that.
But never even heard from Tom.
Not to dive in too deep, but how is Cole Beasley not signed? I mean, I feel like the last time I saw this guy in the league, he was catching every dink down pass. He was going for hundreds of yards. Like I remember him playing quite well last I remember.
Yeah, I feel like I can't remember if I remember this correctly, but I feel like he wanted a lot more money than the Bills were willing to give him to extend him, and then he also, kind of outed himself as a anti-vaxxer. I think that
I was going to say the whole vaccine stance, probably the way he kind of handled that, and just the publicly.
Yeah.
The public
no disrespect to
handling
anti-vaxxers. Any anti-vaxxers listening, we respect you and your decisions. But the way Cole Beasley went about being an anti-vaxxer was
this ticked a lot of people off, I think. Yeah,
rubbed some people the wrong way. So those would be my 2 guesses.
Okay, I guess I just missed that because I was thinking, man, I feel like this guy was like the security blanket for Josh Allen. Like last I saw him. Like fantasy football waiver pickup in PPR league format. So Anyway,
Well, maybe he is again. I mean, who knows? Passes from Tampa Tom now.
I mean, yeah, especially that you mentioned a couple guys that are down, but Julio also been nicked up, questionable to go this week. So I mean, it's gonna be like I said, Scotty Miller, 3 guys from a bar in Tallahassee, Cole Beasley if they
Russell
can
Gage.
get him up to speed, Russell Gage and Rashad Perryman, or I think that's his name.
That's Rashad
Perryman.
I think
that's the thing.
That's it.
Former Lions washout.
It's crazy to me, not to spend too much time on this for sure, but the fact that this team started the season with, of course, it's still coming back from injury, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, and Russell Gage as 4 what seemed to be very dependable and reliable receivers. And now we're at this point going into week 3 and they have to sign Cole Beasley off the street. It's just kind of like, it's ironic. It's kind of funny, but to me, it was just, this was the last team I was expecting to have to go sign a guy. And here we are.
And I bet Tom Brady will still find a way to beat Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. The only other thing I wanted to mention, because the one other name I have on this list, I think I'll say for when we get to sort of the preview, Jason Pierre-Paul. I thought he was retired. I didn't realize he was still actively looking for a team.
That's the theme of this whole news.
Put in some quality years.
Guys we thought were retired.
I mean, he put some quality years in Tampa, as I recall, very recently. So, once again, another name that I was surprised wasn't on a roster, considering that how thin some defenses have looked start of the season. So, good for him getting back involved.
As long as Harbaugh keeps him away from the fireworks,
Oh, cheap shot.
Just keep
low blow, Dennis.
Dennis.
Low blow. Just because he's in Baltimore now does not mean you have to. You didn't have to go there, Dennis.
No, I definitely did. I mean, as soon as you enter Baltimore, Maryland, you become an enemy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then the only other 2 things I wanted to hit on before we went into a little college football recap briefly, just to talk about our 3 teams over the weekend. The Detroit Tigers, Bob. Motor City have hired their new president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, over from San Francisco. The Tigers bringing in some new blood, Bob. I don't know if you're aware, but Scott Harris was the assistant GM to none other than Theo Epstein during the Chicago Cubs roster building to win the 2016 World Series. I believe he was with us from like 2013 to 2020 or something like that, and then just went over to the Giants for the last season. So the man can do it all. He can scout, he can draft, he can, instill some sort of mindset about how the organization develops players moving forward. So I thought this was a home run hire, especially, going out of the organization after Al Avila was the worst GM since Matt Millen.
I mean, like you said, and I don't really think it needs much more elaborating than this, but there's truly only up to go from where the Detroit Tigers are at. And man, sounds like he's got some critical experience. I hope that a change in culture comes along with his hiring, and I've enjoyed watching the bad Detroit Tigers, so I'm really looking forward to watching the good Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, I mean,
if he was in with Theo, that's a high pedigree right there. That's
correct, Dennis.
Yeah,
that's right.
Respect to that.
Here's a brief little, tidbit on him. The Giants, he was part of the, organization when they signed Kevin Gausman after his terrible 2019 season, and now look at Kevin Gausman. Anthony DeSclafani, Dennis remembers how terrible he was for the Reds, and then he performed very well for San Francisco. Drew Smiley, coming off an injury season with the Cubs, went to San Francisco, played pretty well, and then he's been pretty good for the Cubs when healthy. Carlos Rodon, I'm sure we've all heard of that name. He had some shoulder issues with the White Sox, so they didn't want to keep him, so they brought him in. And what is one of the big things that the Tigers are lacking, Bob?
Pitching.
Quality starting pitching. The bullpen has been fairly good, but starting pitching has been absolutely terrible. and they decided to bring in a guy who actually knows what he's doing with starting pitching. So, like I said, huge W. Um, I'm excited. Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty much a home run hire to me, based on everything that you've said, and as I already said, if you're coming from the Theo Epstein tree, then you know what you're doing, because that guy turned Chicago around, Derek, as you're incredibly familiar with, and pretty
Correct.
much terrorized Cincinnati for several years there, and it was really quite impressive what he did. So uh, you gotta you gotta like the hire,
I
and
think
as
so.
Bobby said, there's only one way to go here for Detroit, really. So.
Yeah, just a parting note that I'm sure Bob can appreciate. Scott Harris's three tenets for the Tigers going forward. One, acquire, develop, and retain young players, unlike Al Avila, who always traded away all of our young players. Number two, create a culture of development. Players should think they can come to Detroit and get better. And number three, controlling the strike zone on both sides is the key to everything. So, I mean, from the pitching standpoint, controlling both sides of the plate, the hitting standpoint, controlling both sides of the plate. I mean, if you can do that, you're probably going to win a lot of baseball games. College football recap. Dennis, we'll start with you. The UC Bearcats. Yeah, I mean, did you see what Missouri State almost did to Arkansas? And then you saw how UC played, and how did that make you feel about your team's performance in week 3?
No, you were bringing up the whole like Arkansas thing. It's whatever. Missouri State, I don't care. Arkansas is still a top ranked team. They're going to be fine. We did battle with them. And as far as UC goes, just to briefly recap, because I'm sure that not many of you tuned into that one. UC was down 10-0 after the first 10 minutes of this football game
To
against
who?
Miami Redhawks. The Miami Redhawks of the MAC. Yes, the Miami Redhawks of the MAC. It was 10-0. And you know what UC did? They did what the Bengals did week 1, which is turn the ball over. And we kept putting Miami in really good positions, good field position. Didn't have to drive it that far, and basically just put our backs up against the wall early in the game. That completely turned it around in the late second quarter and through the end of the game, scoring 31 straight, not letting Miami score again after that point. So I'm not worried. I mean, it was an impressive performance, and it was good that they had a little bit of resiliency, or they showed a lot of resiliency and had a little bit of trial to get through and adversity to battle through, because it didn't look good early. And it was mostly on the back of those turnovers. But, once again, Ben Bryant looked good, over 300 yards passing, 2 tubs. So it,
Against
yes, it was
against our
Miami.
division rival,
I'm
against
focused on
division rival, Miami Redhawks.
Correct.
division rival.
Yeah, from being in the MAC
From his
all those,
time at Eastern.
from being in the MAC all those years at Eastern.
Yeah, because okay, it's the Ben Bryant joke. Fine, yeah, that's whatever. Yeah, exactly. I don't. That would be funny if if the quarterbacks faced off. I can't remember the Miami quarterback's name as the starter. He was decent, but UC should be beating Miami in every matchup every year that they have. And so I'm on to Indiana, and Indiana is, I believe they remain 3-0. Didn't they win like in overtime? They
They
win in
did.
overtime. Okay, so Indiana
They
better
did.
record than us.
They did not deserve to beat Western Kentucky, but they somehow managed to pull it out. Tom Allen does it again. But Dennis, are you nervous?
Not this week.
Are you
Not
nervous
this
for
week, no.
Indiana?
If you're an Indiana fan, Wyatt, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to jump on the Indiana football wagon this year after being mostly an Indiana basketball fan. It's not happening for you, my man. I'm sorry. UC's taking you down. It just too good, too much talent.
Bob, your thoughts?
On Indiana?
Is IU going to rise up?
I mean, if you're struggling with the Miami Redhawks,
It's in the Queen City, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty confident it's in the Queen City.
well,
We went
here's
to
the
Bloomington
thing:
last
never count out the Hoosiers. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. Big Ten opposition.
Oh, I've seen it. Indiana takes everyone down to the wire. It doesn't matter how good you are, but it doesn't mean you're going to beat Indiana, or it doesn't mean Indiana's going to beat you.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait 2 more days and find out. Speaking of Indiana, Bob, Michael Penix Jr., Indiana
no.
transfer
Oh, no.
to Washington.
Beautiful transition.
You know, you went into that game, you said this is a game that we probably stick tight in, stay competitive in, and ultimately lose. It certainly didn't start that way. Washington got on you and got on you quick. Defense made a couple big stops. Early in the game, made that stop on the goal line. But the offense, Jarek Broussard falls in the end zone, safety, and then Washington didn't really look back from there. So Michael Penix did you in. Peyton Thorne was largely, I don't know, what word would you use to describe Peyton Thorne's performance, Bob? Disappointing?
I was actually not. I actually wasn't that bad at Peyton Thorne. I thought he played, considering his other performances this season, pretty decent. I believe he was much more accurate than he was in his previous games, and I mean, just to get into this game a little bit more. I mean, to start out, I mean, you get punched in the mouth by Washington right off the bat, and I mean, okay, whatever. We can't defend the pass. What else is new? And we have one bad drive. We start out with like a 3-and-out from the offense, and the story of this game is that Michigan State had like 2 minutes of possession going into like halftime, basically. Because when the starting drives for Washington are touchdown, stop at the 1-yard line, touchdown, plus they already got a safety, and like touchdown again. I mean, we had like the first 6 drives for Washington were like a touchdown barring a stop at the goal line. So now, is there some responsibility for the offense for not giving them more time off the field? Yes. However, the defense during the first half showed literally zero backbone at all. In the second half, I was impressed with the fight, the 4-quarter effort though that I saw. Dennis and I were watching that game largely together, and I know during the end, we were like, man, this could be a ball game if some bounces go our way. So.
There was a moment there.
So, like I said, I didn't expect us to win this game. This is kind of par for the course of what I had expected. Our defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, and then decided to show signs of life when we were already down by about 20 points, which was, that's always great. And the offense looked sluggish to start, but then showed some signs of life later, which, I mean, would we prefer a better performance from them? Yes. But I was, overall, probably the number one thing I was disappointed in was the MSU run game, which never got off the ground at all. Looked absolutely horrendous. Not even just throw away the safety. Everything else looked horrible from the run game. And it was basically Peyton Thorne, chuck it, or bust. And I think RG3 summed it up best. And he had a couple zingers throughout the night. I hope
RG3's great.
Some people saw that broadcast, but to finalize this, he said, I think MSU's figuring out, and I tend to agree, that it's not the same team it was yet last year. You're not going to be able to ground and pound, and you're going to have to, like I said in my preseason prediction, you're going to have to live and die based on what Peyton Thorne is going to do for you. And Peyton Thorne played as I predicted he would during the beginning of the season. Above average game manager, nothing special, made a few throws, and that's just not going to be good enough when your defense is a sieve for at least one half of the ball game. So,
yeah, how concerned are you, Bob, about that secondary? Because Washington got whatever they wanted. I mean, I texted you Chester Kimbrough with like
he looked horrible
emojis.
I mean, I was getting early Shakur Brown vibes from that man. Now, here's the thing. I found myself thinking during the game, how are we just as bad? We were like the bottom of the NCAA last year in defensive back play. And we still won like 11 games or whatever. We still won double-digit games. And I was thinking to myself, God, if there's one thing that maybe could be an improvement for us, it's going to be our secondary, considering that you can't get much worse.
And considering it's your head coach's specialty.
Yeah, correct. And it looked terrible. Mel Tucker took responsibility for it. I mean, I'll give him credit for that at least. But
I mean, I would hope so.
Can we stop a nosebleed? That's going to be my question.
I mean, Bob, I know Michigan State is always competitive just because it's a rivalry, but I mean, did your thoughts change? I mean, I can see J.J. McCarthy hitting the 500-yard mark through the air.
Let me see Minnesota.
I mean,
let me see Minnesota. Let me see Minnesota.
Fair. That's what I think.
Let me see Minnesota.
We're going to learn a lot about both MSU and Minnesota. Minnesota's like an analytics darling right now because they beat up on 3 teams that weren't any better than the teams Michigan beat up on. And so we're going to see if MSU can bounce back. Mohamed Ibrahim is pretty dang good running back. They're down their star wide receiver, but they've got 2 more that are like pretty solid. Is Tanner Morgan still their quarterback?
I believe he is.
I feel like he's been there for like 7 years.
Yeah, he's been there forever then, if that's the case.
But yeah, this will be a big game. We're gonna learn a lot about both teams.
I forgot to mention, and another reason I wasn't too disappointed with Peyton Thorne, like you pointed out before the game, without his number 1 wide receiver, and was still be able to be fairly productive. Was it some of it potentially garbage time yards because they were down? You could make an argument, but they at least were in relevance by the end of the game. So I'll give them that much. Overall, hopefully, I predicted a bounce back next week against Minnesota. I am very worried, but to be fair, I was kind of worried before the season. So I mean, we're right where I think we should be.
Yeah. Yep. Credit to you, Bob. The unbiased Bob, always coming through with the neutral takes, perfectly balanced as all things should be. That's Bobby Epler. For Michigan, I don't really have too much to say. I think the national media and all the Michigan haters have covered our cupcake schedule, well enough. Maryland comes into the big house. I'm expecting a 20, 30-point win. Every year they say Maryland's offense is so dangerous, but they haven't fielded a defense that's been as competent as Michigan State since they've been in the Big Ten. So, I mean, I'm not worried about Talia Tagovailoa throwing all over us. I'm sure they'll score some points early, but, I mean, I can't remember the last time Maryland even finished a game with us where they didn't lose by at least, 25 points. Last year they were saying, this Maryland team's so dangerous, and we beat them 56-10 and did an onside kick to open up the second half. We have no respect for Maryland because they're dog water. And so, is it a trap game? Maybe, but I'm not particularly worried for this one. And they blew out UConn, and Cade McNamara actually got hurt. So we're going to have a pretty interesting backup quarterback situation. So hopefully we don't lose JJ. Because that would not be good. Imagine that. JJ gets hurt and Cade has to save our season again. Sounds like just another team I know, and we can move into the NFL right on that note. The 49ers, Trey Lance, blew his ankle into pieces and is going to miss the rest of the season. And just like I said on my article post from 2 weeks ago that Jimmy G was going to be back in the driver's seat before we knew it, I didn't think it'd be because of injury, but I was proven right anyway. And the 49ers got the job done. I think Trey Lance was a big unknown, and they were going for boom or bust with him. And now you've got Jimmy G, guy who led you to the NFC Championship game last year. You know what you've got with Jimmy G, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do this week. What do you guys think about the whole 49ers situation and how that's unfolded?
Yeah, we were talking about this last week, which was really interesting because now, of course, we have the injury. We were talking about, how long does it take before San Fran brings back Jimmy G? And one of my hot takes before the season started was that Jimmy G was going to throw for more yards this year than Trey Lance. And now, unfortunately, that looks to be basically a shoo-in. Not the way I would have drawn it up. And, I do feel bad for Trey Lance. That's first and foremost, I would say. But ultimately, I think this team is better. And you've heard a lot of analysts say that. You've even heard some rumors that players have been saying that. And, the unfortunate thing really is that San Francisco was really trying to use this as a year to develop Trey Lance because they expect him to be their entire future, and now they're missing out on that. So even though, maybe they're going to have some more success this year, it's kind of a whole lost year in terms of Trey Lance's development. And, if you're San Fran, that's disappointing, but it's just really an interesting situation because of that. I mean, how many times are you starting a guy that is worse than someone else on your roster? And that just doesn't happen, especially in the NFL, that much. And so for San Fran's hopes at having a successful season, I think it does go up. I mean, Jimmy G just has the experience, was in the conference championship just a year ago. The roster is still really good. And, I think San Fran is going to be less of an unknown now than they were. But, for Trey Lance and for the long-term future, it's really unfortunate.
I mean, Bob, they're heading up to Mile High. They've got Broncos country, let's ride, Russell Wilson. Broncos they've looked uninspiring so far. Nathaniel Hackett's had a pretty rough go of things from both the clock management standpoint and just having to absolutely pull out a greaser against Houston of all teams. How do you see this one playing out with Jimmy G now at the helm?
You see, I've been, when our pick'em came around for this week, this was a game that I was sweating bullets over, thinking long and hard about it. I think ultimately, I'm going to ride with the Broncos. I respect Jimmy G. I respect the 49ers, but I think really, I don't know. I think it's just more faith that Denver is just due to turn it around at some point. In my opinion, they're too good to be as bad as they looked. So I think that, in the NFL, talent always at the end of the day shows through. And so I think you got it, especially at home. I think that gives me just the amount of the bump of courage I need to go with the Broncos on that one. If it was at, Candlestick? Is where the 49ers play?
They're at Levi's Stadium now.
Levi Stadium.
Well, my bad. The old name, but I think it was at Levi's. I would be going with the other way. I think it's that close for me.
Yeah. What about you, Dennis? Who you got this week? Denver, San Francisco?
I mean, I trust San Francisco. I don't know. What's the status of George Kittle? Do we know? Because he's still not played.
Yeah, there's a couple, questionable things. Patrick Surtain, I believe, was questionable the last time I checked. George Kittle, still not guaranteed to come back.
I mean, Denver's
George Kittle has practiced 2 days in a row and is on track to play Sunday.
Okay, so I mean, that's good news for the 49ers. I was probably going to lean 49ers anyway, so, that gives me a little more confidence there. Denver has pulled out some W's, but it just hasn't looked that great. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett's had some questionable calls at the end of games and clock management stuff. Russ is, I mean, for all this, I've heard this on some podcasts. But
let Russ eat.
For all this, well, yeah, for all this talk about let Russ cook and tempo, and they have like the most delay of games of any team in the NFL. And it's just like it's just kind of this.
And when
he's got the job done, but
when he's thrown the ball, it hasn't been a very productive offense. Like, he wanted to get away from Seattle because all they wanted to do was establish the run game. There's no doubt in my mind that the strength of the Broncos is their run game with Javonte Williams. I mean, dude's a workhorse. And they got Russell Wilson going 19 for 39 with sub 300 yards. I mean, I just think it's kind of ironic how Russ wanted to go somewhere where he could cook. And the fact of the matter is the strength of the Broncos is their run game.
I heard someone say today that they have a conspiracy theory that Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson are just closet Raider fans. And they've just been sabotaging the whole Denver franchise this whole time just to allow Derek Carr and Devontae Adams to rise up the ranks. No, but I mean, wouldn't that be something? It just hasn't been that impressive. And even though they've gotten the victories, it's, I would say, not hit expectations. And so with Jimmy G back at the helm, maybe George Kittle coming back, give me San Fran.
Yeah. Just a game that wrapped up a little bit ago, Steelers-Browns. I don't know if either of you two really watched that game. Mitch Trubisky is still Mitch Trubisky. You wonder how long it's going to take before Kenny Pickett becomes the starter. I don't know what the Steelers' bye week is, but I'm guessing that the bye week, the game after the bye week at the latest, is probably the first time we see Kenny Pickett. Because I don't know if you guys saw those clips from like Najee Harris and George Pickens and Deontay Johnson sort of like talking about the offense. They seem pretty fed up with the fact that they're getting wide open and Mitch can't get them the ball.
No, I saw that, and it hasn't looked good. I turned on this game in the second half. I'm looking for Pittsburgh's bye week is what I'm doing right now. Bobby, you have any thoughts?
I really want to see Kenny Pickett out there. He's probably the quarterback that I was most intrigued to see. And although in Pick'em I did take the Steelers to win this ball game, I am also can not lose any sleep over the fact that Mike Tomlin is one game closer to not finishing 500.
I was just about to bring that up, Bob. I was like, I know one thing Bob takes away from this game. They are one game closer to not being able to finish 500. I mean, you love to
Stroud on the sideline at the end of that game. He was not happy, and I mean, obviously there's no reason for him to be, but by week 9 for Pittsburgh.
I think that's a perfect
pretty much halfway.
Timeline. That's a perfect timeline. I'd be surprised if we didn't see Kenny Pickett earlier, but that is week 9 sounds like the perfect time to make a switch. I don't know about
this would be a twist of irony. I wonder when Mitch Trubisky's birthday is, because they could pull a Bengals and bench him just like we benched Andy Dalton for Ryan Finley. Ken Anderson probably still, and like I'm someone who doesn't necessarily project too much in terms of I'm not going to put Burrow at the top yet because he hasn't done it yet, even though he's probably the most talented and he's on the trajectory to be the best Bengals quarterback of all time, but he hasn't. I mean, he's in his 3rd year, so let's pump the brakes just a tad, especially with what we've seen so far this year, and we'll get into that. But probably Ken Anderson, Boomer Esiason, Andy Dalton. That's probably the top 3. I mean, those are just the 3 names that come to mind. And then Carson Palmer.
Is Andy above Carson?
I think he is. He took us to the playoffs more times, and Carson continued his career with Arizona. I mean, sure, Carson had some good years, but they're close. Him and Andy were close. I mean, I think Andy was a little bit disappointing in terms of never getting over that hump because he was supposed to come in and replace Carson and be, and be better. And he just never quite got to the level that I think everybody was hoping, and it just turned into this.
You can blame Vontaze Burfict for that, Dennis.
I know. I definitely blame Vontaze. I mean, that was in my article, if you read that, which you basically can throw out at this point because none of that happened. And all of that was complete garbage based on what I saw this week out of the Cincinnati Bengals. But
yeah, I mean, let's get right into it. I was going to bring up the Bengals-Jets game as our next preview anyway. Dennis, I mentioned this to you over the weekend, and I said a few podcast episodes ago, feels like it was just last week, but it was, a couple weeks before the NFL season got underway. We had a discussion about how the Bengals offensive line on paper was supposed to be better, and I said, I'm not convinced that they'll be any better until I see them play some games together. And sure enough, how many sacks have you guys given up? I know they haven't all been on the offensive line, but I'm pretty sure it's double digits, isn't it?
7 and 6. It's 13. I was looking it up in preparation for the pod today. We gave up 7 against Pittsburgh and 6 last week against Dallas. It's ugly.
Dennis, I mean, I'll just go ahead and rant away, my friend, on what you saw from last week.
I have a lot of things. I have a new scapegoat this week, which I'll get to in a second. It's not the offensive line, surprise, surprise. But I said if we lost to Dallas, I'd be concerned. So now I'm concerned. And I also said last week, if you checked out that episode, that it looked like against Pittsburgh preseason week 1, and I hope we don't have to go through weeks 2 and 3. Turns out we do, apparently, because that's what it looked like preseason week 2. And that's my first kind of gripe and argument here is just it didn't look like they wanted to play the game. I don't know. I wasn't seeing the energy. I wasn't seeing effort in the first half. I mean, sure, the second half they came back, but out of everybody, I mean, Joe Burrow was on the sidelines basically sulking, and it just looked like everyone had already given up on the whole shebang right off the bat. And so that was disappointing. I was sitting here screaming at the TV of like, it just didn't seem like they care, and that was really disappointing for me to see. And hopefully that's not the case moving forward. But no, this week, I mean, you mentioned it, 6 more sacks. The offensive line gave up a few more pressures. I talked about that last week. Burrow is up to the 15th most pressured quarterback now on the small sample size from 22nd after week 1. So now you can put shift a little bit of that blame onto the offensive line for sure. Burrow's still holding onto the ball too long. But my new scapegoat is Zach Taylor. Because, and you talked about this
the head coach
after
Dennis.
the Super Bowl. Play calling in this game was atrocious. I don't know if either of you had the opportunity to watch this game, but basically what defenses are doing to us now is it's the Patrick Mahomes Kansas City thing from a year ago where you put 2 deep high safeties and don't let Joe Burrow throw over the top of Jamar Chase. No big plays. I pulled the stats on this because I was curious. Last season, the Cincinnati Bengals, 27 30-plus yard completions, second in the NFL. 15 40-plus yard completions, second in the NFL. 12 50-yard-plus completions, first in the NFL. This season, no 30-plus yard catches yet. None. Not a single 30-plus yard completion on the whole season. We're not able to throw it deep. We can't go deep. And Joe Burrow is refusing to take Hayden Hurst tight end over the middle or dump it down to Joe Mixon. And the play calling is not establishing the run like it should early in the game, which may open up the opportunities for us to throw it deep. And instead, we're just coming out guns blazing, and it's not there because the defense knows that's what we want to do. Hand the ball to Joe Mixon, get it to him creatively in space, get it to Jamar Chase in space, throw it to Hayden Hurst over the middle, who's a very reliable option so far, and force them to respect you being willing to take what they're going to give you and then, take your shots later in the game. It feels like play calling 101 to me, and we're just not doing it. I don't understand why we're not running Joe Mixon early in the game. We came out in the second half, and Mixon was busting off a couple 6-7 yard runs here and there, and then look what we were able to do. Throw the ball. And we came back in the football game. I don't understand. I don't understand the play calling. And on top of all that, it's just not very creative. I mean, when we do hand Joe the ball like I'm calling for here, it's not a surprise. The defense knows what's coming because we're not mixing in any creative screens, end arounds, anything like that. It's very disappointing to me.
Dennis, the house of horrors that are the New York Jets. Mike White got you last year. Is MVP Joe Flacco is still elite gonna get you again, but not in a Baltimore Ravens uniform this time?
It'd be the ultimate irony to send us to 0-3. I sure hope not, man. I hope that we have a better game plan than that
Dennis,
coming into this week.
What's the panic meter right now? 1 to 10 scale. What's the panic level?
I mean, and that's the other thing is if you watch any of the interviews, Joe Burrow is saying everybody basically pulled the Aaron Rodgers relax thing. Like nobody's panicking. We're 0-2. Nobody's panicking. Whatever.
Go on LeBron James 0 Dark 30. I deleted all my
all the social media is gone. Deleted. If you saw that, yeah, basically he's just going off the grid. Kind of. I'm at like a 7. I was probably at like a 3 before this Dallas game, and maybe a 2.5 because I was not concerned. I mean, overtime loss to Pittsburgh where we basically lost because our long snapper got hurt. It wasn't that big a deal. This game was ugly. They didn't look overly motivated, and all the things I just laid out. And not to mention Cooper Rush at quarterback for Dallas, which we can talk about later too. But I was very concerned after watching this game. I was fuming at my television, that's for sure. And I would say the concern meter is up to a 7. If we lose to the Jets, we're like over 10. Like it's like full panic mode. It's
Bob,
bad.
Bob, I mean, fire up Chips, Cooper Rush, getting the job done. I mean, Dennis repping CMU, repping Cooper Rush, beating his own team. Hats off to you, Dennis, for acknowledging that. I mean, Bob, should Bengals fans be at DEFCON 1 right now? Because that was an ugly game, and the Cowboys didn't score the entire second half.
Yeah, I was making weird faces when Dennis was talking because I was surprised he wasn't at a 9 or a 10 for panic. This is disaster personified. This is losing to a guy that started 3 football games in the NFL.
Undefeated.
That's the thing, though. I was about to say that. Everybody keeps talking about, Cooper Rush is not a starting quality quarterback. He's also been pretty good when he's played, and he looked good in this game. He wasn't making mistakes. He was finding open receivers, and I'm sure our defense was much worse than we saw in week 1 and for all of last season, but I didn't think he looked half bad. It was also kind of impressive.
No, I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Mr. Rush, but here's the thing. If you're the Super Bowl AFC representative, you got to get it done against Cooper Rush. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter on it. And as I was telling Dennis,
I mean, I agree with you. I would. That's why I was screaming at my television, and I was upset like none other. I was furious because you're definitely not a game you should in any way lose, let alone be down 14-3 right off the bat.
And as I was telling Dennis before the show, Derek, I hate to be right about the Bengals and hate to say I told you so about the Bengals going into the season, but I told you so.
No, I mean, hold on a second. It's 0-2. I said I'm at a 7, but that's not throw the whole thing by the wayside here. I mean, come on.
Yes. Does this look like an R?
Over.
Yes, it does. It does
this look like an R?
It does, because
here's a good point.
The big regression has
Here's
dropped.
a good point I thought Joe brought up in one of his press conferences is it's not the first time we've lost 2 games in a row. And it's not. I went back and looked. We lost 2 games in a row twice last season. Sure, it didn't start the season that way, and it wasn't against Cooper Rush, but it
and Mitch Trubisky.
Record-wise,
don't leave that out.
Record-wise, well, I mean, we lost that game to T.J. Watt, but whatever.
And Mitch.
Mitch didn't do jack. I mean, it was a pick 6 right off the bat of the game, and the defense, which basically shut us down and made us look like fools, turning us over 5 times. Mitch did not win that game, and just like he didn't win tonight because he's actually not good, and Cleveland's just better.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, I'm pulling for you. I mean, the Bengals absolutely screwed me over in fantasy, single-handedly cost me my fantasy matchup, actually, by letting the Cowboys defense get over 10 points, and then they couldn't score, so Evan McPherson had 13 points, and Joe Mixon didn't get a single touchdown, and so just absolutely screwing me over. So
what was the other thing I was going to say is this is going to come off as an excuse, but let's not pretend that Dallas's defense is bad.
No, Dallas's
It's
defense.
a very talented defense. Parsons was all over us the entire day, and it's really hard to block that guy.
It's the same Dallas defense that held Tampa Bay to 20. So I won't take anything away from the Dallas defense, but at the same time, I mean, gotta be Cooper Rush.
One question for Dennis before we finish up on the Bengals. You talked about Joe Mixon establishing the run, and Zach Taylor committing to that and to play calling. Is it more about when the timing of the runs are happening, or just how many there are? Because Joe Mixon's leading the league in rushing attempts right now. So does that need to be spaced? Does that need to be spaced in a better spot, or like what? Because this man has been getting the rock like no other. He hasn't been. I like to point out he also hasn't been particularly productive by his standards in those rushing attempts.
Because the Bengals O-line is cheap.
Well, that's true, but I mean for his standards, and I just curious on your thoughts on that. Curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would imagine that at least part of that is because we're probably leading the league in plays on offense. Because, I mean, we're running an astronomical number of plays. So to just look at rush attempts, I mean, Joe Burrow's probably high in pass attempts as well, if I had to guess.
High in picks, we know
But
that.
it's backwards to me because, as I was talking about, and I think you nailed it a little bit with the timing. We came out in the second half, run, run, run. Why can't we open the game that way? Why are we opening the game guns blazing, throwing it as much as we possibly can, which is actually not really throwing it as much as we can because Burrow's looking downfield and getting sacked, so it's not actually throwing it. But that's part of it. Is I definitely feel like the timing is we just need to establish that earlier, and then the other part of it is it doesn't necessarily have to be. And I know I said establish the run with Joe Mixon. I guess I'll rephrase slightly. I don't think it has to be just HB dive like all game, like early in the game. Screen passes, short over the middle routes for 5 yards.
Please.
Hit the tight end.
Give me the Joe Mixon PPR, dang it.
He also he's also got a ton
to
of
anybody that are
receptions.
less than 10 yards.
I think Joe Mixon's got 10 catches on the year already. I think either 9 or 10. So let him eat.
And yeah, I mean, be willing to get the ball to your playmakers at shorter yardage distances and let them go for. And we saw that in the second half. I saw a lot more of that in the second half. We hit Jamar on a couple of quick slants, like 6-7 yard slant routes over the middle, and then he took it and got an extra 5-6 yards from there and picked up the first. Like, we need to do that more, and just march our way down the field. We had like an 8-minute drive in the second half. That touchdown drive was like a ridiculously long drive. Fine, I'll take that. That keeps our defense off the field for longer, and I'm completely okay with that game plan. And keep their defense out there longer. Keep ours on the sideline.
Dennis, score prediction: Jets Bengals this weekend.
What's the over-under?
We're still betting favorites, which thank goodness for that.
It's 45.5 over under. You're a 6-point favorite in New York.
That's a lot of points. That's a lot of points.
I'll go.
Just what do you think?
23-17 Cincy. 23-17 Cincy. We'll go 6 at the dot.
Wow.
Well, another low-scoring affair that I don't like the sounds of that for my Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow fantasy implications, but as long as Joe Mixon's getting one of those tubs, I guess I'll let it slide.
We'll let you have them. I mean, that's what I've been preaching this whole podcast. So let Joe Mixon eat a little bit. Let's do it.
But yeah, I mean, we spent so much time on the Bengals. We didn't even hardly talk about the Jets and their highly improbable comeback. Just nobody in the AFC North wanted to win last week, it would appear. Baltimore collapsed late against Miami. Pittsburgh couldn't do jack diddly squat against a mediocre New England team. Cincinnati falling flat on their face in Big D. And then Cleveland managing to blow a 14 or 13-point lead with less than 2 minutes left. I mean, Bob, is Joe Flacco still elite?
Spoiler alert, right bench baller, Joe Flacco for me, baby. I mean, I hate to jump the gun, but we're talking about him now. I don't know how I can not bring it up.
I mean, let's just jump straight into right bench ballers. Why not? Let's get a little wacky.
I mean, this man, 4 tubs, 0 picks, 307 yards passing, 110 passer rating. I mean, what do you want from old backup Joseph Vincent Flacco, baby? Come on. I mean, I'm looking for a repeat performance this coming week. Is all I got to say on that front. But anyway, I don't know what to say. I mean, Joe Flacco, nobody expected diddly squat out of him, and he's come in older than the hills, 37 years of age, and still managing to get the job done. I don't know. What were your thoughts? What were your thoughts on it?
I told Bobby that his official right bench baller needs to be Joe Flacco in the last 2 minutes of the game, because that's pretty much the only part of Joe Flacco that deserves to be a right bench baller. But I do respect the decision. Guy is still, journeying around the league after many, many years, and it was impressive. There's no doubt about that, and I was happy to see him beat Cleveland.
Potential QB controversy in New York when Zach Wilson comes back? Maybe. We'll have to see. Dennis, I mean, I just say we jump right into right bench ballers since Bob popped the cap on it. I mean, go ahead and
sorry,
give it.
but
it's actually kind of perfect. No, No, Bobby, thanks for doing it because my right bench baller is none other, and I hate to do this, Cooper Rush. I mean, it's just gotta be fire up. I'm sorry that he, destroyed basically my Bengals, but fire up for the CMU grad. Only 235 yards and one touchdown, but no picks. He just didn't make mistakes, and he was accurate. I mean, I watched the entire game. He hit the open receivers. He has a much higher QBR in the game than Joe Burrow. He outthrew Joe Burrow, and didn't turn the ball over. He did exactly what Dallas needed him to do. And was he a world beater? Absolutely not. But in the end, he won the game. He did enough, and he is the definition of a bench right bench baller. I mean, he was
Correct.
not expected. He would never get into the game as long as Dak is healthy, and so good for him. I was 2% of me was happy to see that, and I felt like this was a good space to give him the respect he deserves.
If there was anyone to lose to, Cooper Rush, I mean, not the worst team in the world. I'm going to go a completely different direction into the baseball world. To Bobby's favorite MLB team, not named the Detroit Tigers, New York Yankees second baseman shortstop Gleyber Torres. Yesterday, 2 home runs, 5 RBI, and a walk, and 4 at-bats against the Pittsburgh Pirates. For the month of September, he's hitting
He's hot.
286, absolutely ripping the stick. I mean, dude was hitting 236 at one point, and he's hitting 286 in the month of November. Raised his average to 252, his OBP to 304, slugging over 800, and has had a number of multiple homer games. He had another one against the Rays, 2 homers, 4 RBIs. Dude's been an absolute productive, hot-hitting machine lately. And that's all on the backs of the other thing I wanted to point out that I didn't earlier. Aaron Judge, his
All
60th
rise.
home run. At his 60th home run, there was a dog pile for it. I don't know if you guys saw,
Yep.
but I think those dudes need to work on their negotiation tactics because
Only
I
a
mean,
signed ball back.
only a signed ball and some bats. I mean, people got to understand. Your favorite athletes don't care about you the same way you care about them. You know what I mean? Like Aaron Judge doesn't know you. Aaron Judge doesn't care about you personally. And so to try and do the right thing and just be like, we want Aaron Judge to have this ball because we're such big fans. Screw that. Get paid and get like massive autographs and all the gear you can possibly get because you're never going to get another chance like that in your lifetime. And they got money to spend. So I don't know. That was my thought on it. I mean, I guess hats off to trying to do the right thing. But I say screw that and try and get as much bang for your buck as you can.
I mean, that was a
13-year-old
dog pile.
kid earlier this season who got more. I can't remember what the situation was, but it was like maybe a first homer in the league or something like that. And I was watching a broadcast. He got like season tickets and like all sorts of fun stuff. He was like 13 years old. I mean, come on, guys.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm pretty sure the ball was valued at like 6 figures. Sell it on the auction block as quick as you can before Aaron Judge hits number 61. I mean, there was so much. You could buy as many Aaron Judge autographed baseballs off of Fanatics that you wanted to with $100,000.
And season tickets.
And season ticket for multiple years, you could buy New York Yankees season tickets with $100K. So I don't know. I mean, I just think fans need to remember your favorite athletes and your favorite teams. They don't think about you the same way you think about them, and so just get as much money as you can for monumental collectibles. That's my personal opinion.
A little bit off topic, but I did just notice this, and I wanted to bring this up. I just happened to glance back over at the Joe Flacco Pro Football Reference page that I had up for stats, and it's in like for some reason it's like got a section where it talks about like the highlight of the team success or whatever, and it is a throwback to when Mike White beat the Bengals and threw over 400 yards. Like highlights of last 2 seasons. Mike White upsets the Cincinnati Bengals. Dennis, it can't escape you. I'm sorry. I just had to bring it up.
It can't happen again. It can't happen again. If we lose back-to-back seasons to Mike White and Joe Flacco as New York Jets, I'm gonna puke.
Rightfully so. But yeah, by the time we record again, I'm sure Aaron Judge will have hit his 60 seconds, so that'll be a pretty fun thing to discuss and maybe talk about, you know, Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, maybe bring up some of those old
Reminisce. Maybe just
discussions. Yeah,
reminisce.
maybe bring up some old Barry Bonds discussions, but you have to wait for next week's episode, so you have to
Check
tune
out
in.
the article, baby.
That's right. We'll briefly run through just some of the other previews. Bills Dolphins, like we mentioned earlier, Tuanon came 28 points in the fourth quarter, just an ultimate meltdown from former Michigan defensive coordinator Mike McDonald and the Baltimore Ravens defense, wasting an absolute gem of a performance from Lamar Jackson. Who do you guys got in this one? I'm taking Buffalo and Josh Allen because they just look like an absolute juggernaut Monday night.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Miami bandwagon. We'll get to that a little bit later, but in this game, I'm sticking with Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo is just the best team in the league. It's pretty clear.
Literally couldn't have took the words right out of my mouth. Dennis, Miami bandwagoner too, but I also no chance against the Bills.
Raiders Titans. The Titans coming off getting blasted by the Bills, also coming off that week 1 loss to the New York Football Giants, gross, and the Las Vegas Raiders, who absolutely melted down on their own against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray went full video game mode and somehow found a man in the back of the end zone for that 2-point conversion. Raiders shot themselves in the foot, would have gotten them on 4th down, but had a defensive holding or something stupid. I mean, just again, last week was full of all these unforeseen meltdowns. And, 2 0-2 teams that I don't think anyone expected to be 0-2 coming into this week. This is pretty much a toss-up for me.
Yeah, it feels like 2 very average AFC teams right now. Just like these teams going to be fighting for the wild card at the end of the season. Or, just on the outside of it potentially. But all things considered, at least what I've seen, I like the Raiders a little bit more. Especially coming off of, kind of an embarrassing loss. I think they'll be fired up.
Yeah, Bob, I'll get to you. I'll just give mine quick because since you're our resident Raiders dark horse fan, I'll let you expand a little bit. I'm going to take Tennessee. I think Mike Vrabel is too good of a coach to have his team perform that poorly again. And this is pretty much like my Titans make or break game. If they lose this game, I'm going to write them off the rest of the season. If they win this game, I can see them making a run in what is all of a sudden an extremely weak AFC South. We'll get to that Indianapolis debacle in a little bit, but I've got to stick with Derrick Henry. I've got to think that somehow the Titans figure it out. But clearly, they are missing A.J. Brown.
Yeah. I'm the Raiders guy, so I'm going with the Raiders. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Raiders have not looked overly impressive, but I think the backbone of what's made Tennessee the past couple of years has just not been there in the first few weeks. I mean, I haven't seen Derrick Henry making any headlines for running over people, stiff-arming people, and unfortunately, if he's not doing that, if he's not being King Henry, then it's going to be a long day at the office for the Tennessee Titans because Ryan Tannehill's getting exposed, and their defense hasn't been anything to write home about either, but it never really was. So I just gotta hope that my Raiders can get on the board in this one, but it's gonna be a dogfight.
100%. Next game on the docket, accidentally clicked into that one. Chiefs Colts, like we just said, the Colts were absolutely disastrous against Jacksonville. I mean, an absolute house of horrors. I think the Colts have lost like 10 straight games in Jacksonville or something ridiculous like that. Getting shut out when you have Jonathan Taylor as your running back. And Matt Ryan, all of a sudden Carson Wentz doesn't look so bad anymore. I mean, I don't know what's going on in Indianapolis and why they can't, accomplish anything, but that was an absolutely horrible game, man. if only the Lions played in the AFC South, my goodness, but this is pretty easy. I think Kansas City will probably win by 30 plus.
Colts look pretty bad. Maybe Jacksonville's the team to beat in the South right now. Who knows? I mean, honestly, it's ugly. The Colts look like they might just like not be good now, and Kansas City is pretty much dominating so far as per usual. They did in week 1, and they squeezed out a really close one against a really good Chargers team in week 2. So yeah, and they had some extra days because they played on Thursday night. So yeah, give me the Chiefs in this one all day long.
And I'm right there with you. Chiefs all day.
Yeah, not much more to add. Next game up, Ravens Patriots. Patriots coming off of an ugly win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Ravens coming off of a back-breaking loss to Miami. Bill Belichick, I think, has had the Ravens number, but Lamar gets it done. Matt Patricia and Joe Judge as co-offensive coordinators have been an absolute disaster, and hopefully they stay through week 5 when Detroit comes to town. But I've got the Ravens winning this one and winning this one handily because New England just doesn't have an offense.
Yeah, when I watched that game against Pittsburgh Sunday, and New England won, but man, was it not pretty. Just did not look good, and of course Baltimore collapsed at the end, but they were really dominating a pretty good Miami team before that for a solid 3+ quarters. So yeah, I mean, give me Baltimore for sure.
Baltimore, I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think that Baltimore will win probably by 10.
Here's a question. Is Mac Jones the guy? Or do you think the Patriots will be looking for a quarterback in these next 2 draft classes?
I don't necessarily know that Mac Jones is the problem. I think they've just got a lot of problems right now. I mean, you mentioned the coaching staff. They don't really have a stud running back. They don't have a stud receiver. I mean, Jacoby Myers, sure. And it just, there's nobody there, it doesn't feel like to me.
Yeah, I can't have said it better myself, Dennis. I was just about to say, I mean, what weapons are we talking about? Nothing. So, I mean, here's the thing.
Totally fair.
If they were expecting to draft, maybe they were expecting to draft another Tom Brady, but clearly Mac Jones is not another Tom Brady, and there's no shame in that. However, that just means that you have to put some people around him that actually are competent at skill positions, and not have preferably Matt Patricia calling plays or anywhere near those type of duties after what we've seen from him in the past. So, Mac Jones, not necessarily the problem, but not necessarily the solution either.
I think that's definitely fair. Saints Panthers. Jameis. You never cease to amaze us, Jameis. That's my poem for the week. A backbreaker
Beautiful.
pick 6 against Tampa Bay to really put the game out of reach. Going up
Backbreaker,
against,
man, you did that on purpose. You did that that was a low blow backbreaker. Come on, Derek. That was almost as bad as the fireworks joke. Come on.
hey, we're sharp here, Dennis. We stay sharp on these things. You know what I mean? I'm right there with you. But yeah, the Panthers are just terrible. I mean, I know the Baker Mayfield, resurrection project was very strong in these parts, but I mean, it's just not there. It's just not there, and the Saints defense has proven that they can play some pretty good football, and I just can't see Carolina scoring more than like 13 points. I mean, we'll get into it at Garbage Time Takes Your Money, but only scoring 16 on the Giants, I don't see how they score more than 16 against the Saints.
I'm going with New Orleans. Carolina's just not been very impressive this year, and New Orleans just has better talent. They've played better football thus far.
I'm waving the white flag. The Big Easy's getting a win.
Bob, I mean, you've had some real rough luck. I mean, the Raiders letting the bed to start the season.
I mean, we've talked about it last week too, but at least one of my teams got a dub this week.
That's right, and that's our next team up. The Lions taking on the Vikings in Minnesota. Minnesota coming off a game in which the same Philadelphia team that only beat Detroit by 3 made Minnesota look like a bunch of high schoolers. I mean, Kirk Cousins in prime time, maybe that's all it was. He's 2-10 on Monday night games or something ridiculous like that. I mean, it was just primetime Kirk Cousins, and maybe Minnesota fans can write it off as, just classic Kirk Cousins in primetime. But I watched that game, and I came out with a lot of confidence that, you know, this is a Lions team that put up 35 points on that Eagles defense. And that Eagles defense isn't any different than what they were in week one. And we were pretty much neck and neck with them all the way if we wouldn't have gone 3-and-out 3 straight times and then thrown a pick six. Hopefully, schematically, they're able to take some things. I know we used to have a Darius Slay. We had the Darius Slay, and then Matt Patricia ran him off like a bum. But I'd like to think that schematically we'll be able to figure out a way to contain Justin Jefferson. And then our run defense has been pretty good, save for Jalen Hurts scrambles. I mean, there's no reason why the Lions can't walk out of this stadium with a win, especially, coming off of back-to-back 35-plus point performances on offense. I mean, that Washington defense isn't a bunch of bums. They have arguably a top 5 defensive line in the league with Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat. Chase Young, when he comes back, fortunately, we didn't have to play him. But it's not like the Commanders have a bunch of bums. Their linebackers aren't very good. But, I mean, the Lions pretty much had their way with them. And if not for them playing a little conservative on the back end defensively, when they were up 22-0, you'd like to see them keep the foot on the gas. But, I mean, that was one of the most – that first half was a perfect performance from Detroit. I've never seen Detroit Lions football look that good. And then the second half, to be able to say, you know what? We've let them creep back in the game. It's 22-15 offense. Make something happen for us. And they did it. And we didn't get the same old Lions. I mean, Bob, what a Sunday.
Big W. Big W. I'm glad I didn't have to come out here and declare DEFCON 1 for the Detroit Lions and start spiking stuff all over the place.
You said it was a must-win. I said it was a can't-lose, and sure enough.
And I just like to point this out. I know it's not garbage time takes your money yet, but and this isn't our game, but the Detroit Lions are 5.5-point dogs this week at Minnesota. So that's one of the biggest spreads. That's one of the biggest spreads I'm seeing of the week. So,
dude, give me that. Give me the 5.5. Holy cow!
That line started at 7.5. It opened at 7.5.
Yeah. So not much respect.
We're like, no way.
Not much respect for the Honolulu Blue with those kinds of lines, but like I said before the season, I think we get at least one victory over the Vikings. There's no reason it cannot be on Sunday. I would like 2 victories over the Vikings. So I think we really, really have a great chance of winning this ball game.
I mean, we should have beat them. We should have beat them twice last year. Should have beat them twice with one of the worst rosters in the entire NFL.
Correct.
I mean, this Vikings team isn't that much different from the one we faced last year, and this Lions team is a lot better than the one we had last year.
Correct. Here's the thing. I'm just hoping. I understand 35 points a game is not really realistic to expect from the offense, but please, God, let it not be this week that we come back to the mean, because we need all. I think we'll need probably at least 30 to get the job done against the Vikes this week, and I don't know. Maybe our defense will put on a clinic like they did in the first half against the Commanders, but I think really this game is going to be won and lost on the offensive side of the football. And we've seen encouraging signs there. We have no reason not to believe in that to this point. So I've got to ride with my boys.
Yeah, Dennis, your thoughts, and then I'll wrap it up.
I mean, right now, in terms of this game, I don't really know what to think about this Minnesota team. I mean, they came in and put a beat down on Green Bay in pretty impressive fashion, and then laid a dud on Monday night. So it's kind of the tale of two teams as far as that goes. And I was really high on Minnesota coming into the season. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any reason right now. And just like you said, Philadelphia pretty much, beat them down. And it was a game that the Lions kept very close when they played the Eagles just a week ago back in week one. So, based on the the transitive property, I guess you got to go with Detroit. I don't think there's any reason right now that they're 5.5 point dogs. Give me that. Give me them on the money line. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure that that's worth maybe a little sprinkle. And the other
198
thing is we
plus
talked about this
198.
plus 198, yeah, for sure. We talked a little bit about this before Detroit came away victorious against the Commanders and Carson Wentz, is that really one of the things that sunk you guys in the Eagles game was Jalen Hurts being able to escape the pocket, run with his legs, and make things happen. Carson Wentz can't do that. Kirk Cousins also
can't do that,
can't
yeah.
really do that. And so
Pin him back
that's
and
going
go
to be
get
a
him.
common factor here. If we're gonna use that as a common factor here, which I think is fair given how good Detroit played against Carson Wentz, and sure it's Carson Wentz, but just how good the defense looked. Yeah, I like Detroit a lot.
Here's what I'll say. Last week, Antonio Gibson ran the ball 14 times for 28 yards. The Commanders had one run go over 7 yards. If the Lions can contain Dalvin Cook the same way they just contained Antonio Gibson,
Which has plagued us, has been our downfall in the past.
it has. There is no reason why the Lions can't win this game. I'm not convinced really that Minnesota is even the better team here. Their secondary is pretty young, from what I understand. They've had a lot of turnover over the last couple of years. The linebacking core is not the same as it used to be, with Anthony Barr no longer there. Yes, they added Zadarius Smith on the defensive line, but the Lions with three well, I won't disrespect Evan Brown like that because he played a bunch of games for us last year at the center position. But we had a guy, fourth string offensive tackle, who had never played guard before, Dan Skipper, come in and absolutely mean mug his way all over the Washington defensive line. Logan Stenberg, who has really struggled after being a fourth round pick a couple years ago, coming out, and he's not always that great, but for the most part, he gets the job done. 3 reserve offensive linemen, and DeAndre Swift on a bum angle still ran for basically 100 yards. There's no reason why the Lions can't run on the Vikings defense when Philadelphia ran all over them. Philadelphia got whatever they wanted on the ground. Not to mention it helped that they were given favorable field positioning by Kirk Cousins turnovers, but the point still stands that the Vikings rush defense is terrible, and the Lions, I've never seen us run the ball this good. I'm sure people who were alive to watch Barry Sanders have seen us run the ball this good. This is the first time I've ever seen a competent run game from the Detroit Lions. Bob, there's a world that is not so unrealistic that the Lions are 4-1 going
Bobby's
into
licking his chops.
And just maybe my prediction could happen.
Minnesota, extremely winnable game this week. Seattle, garbage team, very winnable game. New England, mediocre, very winnable game.
We need revenge on Matt Patricia.
We do, and I think there aren't too many holdovers from that team anymore because they were all dog water, so rightfully we got rid of them.
However,
but there's still some guys there. DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson, guys on the offensive line, Tracy Walker.
and they remember.
I mean, Matt Patricia nearly ruined Tracy Walker's career by playing him out of position. And so I'm sure, and Amani Oruwariye was there, Jeff Okuda. There's some guys that have a bone to pick, I think, with Matt Patricia for making their lives miserable, and especially on the defensive end would like nothing more than to shut out the New England offense. I mean, don't be surprised. I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to call my shot. But if the Lions shut out the Patriots in Week 5, I would not be surprised. That's all I got to say about that. And then they come off the bye week and get the Cowboys. And all of a sudden, the Cowboys are a very winnable game. So Bob, it's becoming increasingly difficult to not chug the Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid. It's becoming very, very difficult. But if we win this week, I might be swimming in it. I
That's
might be
right.
swimming in it.
That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear, Derek, because it's our time, baby.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a fun one, and I just hope we come out on top. Briefly getting through the next ones, Eagles, Commanders, two teams the Lions have faced, one loss, one win. The Eagles, everyone's anointing them as Super Bowl, contenders now, and I'd like to point out that the Lions only lost by 3 points to them, to all those anointing the Eagles this early. But I've got the Eagles in this one. If the Commanders can't stop the Lions, they can't stop Philadelphia.
Eagles.
I'm not anointing the Eagles yet, but they're way better than Washington. It's pretty clear.
Texans, Bears. Do the Texans get their first win of the season and be? Has any team ever started 1-1-1? How crazy would that be?
Oh, I'm sure. I don't know. That'd be wild.
I think
That
they
is
do.
pretty wild.
I think they do get the win.
And I think they do. I'm with you. Yeah, absolutely. The Bears are horrible. They couldn't do anything after that first drive on Sunday Night Football. And, I mean, no passing game whatsoever. The offensive line's not good. Defense is not good. Yeah, the Texans. Give me the Texans.
I've also got the Texans. I think that's a juicy one. In 2018, the Steelers, Browns, Packers, and Vikings all started 1-1-1.
Oh, that's a stat for you. That is a stat for you. 2018?
2018. I don't even know
That's a
how
trivia
I can't
question.
remember that. Yeah. But yeah, only on garbage time takes do you get the hard hitting stats like that.
That's right.
Jaguars, Chargers, a game that's all of a sudden kind of intriguing. But I'm our resident Chargers,
Faithful.
flag bearer, and Justin Herbert's gonna have a day.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I got to be honest about that. I'm kind of, getting there with the whole Jaguars. There's a little bit of hype there now for me, and I do like a lot of their young players, but I think it's pretty clear the Chargers are a little bit better team. I don't think I'm going to be betting this game because this is one that I could see, goes wrong for the Chargers, but I still think that they're probably the favorite for a good reason.
2 words: bolt up.
Love to hear it, Bob. Another intriguing game, NFC West matchup, Rams-Cardinals. The Rams have been shaky at best, I'd say, nearly having a reverse 28-3 with, the Falcons almost rising up last week. The Cardinals coming off of an absolutely absurd victory last week where Kyler Murray, absolute magician, and then they win on a fumble recovery for a touchdown. But they didn't really look that good against Las Vegas and were completely overmatched by Kansas City. And the same thing with the Rams, were just completely overmatched by Buffalo. This one feels like it should be a toss-up, but for some reason I feel like the Rams just win this one, almost kind of easily.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, but I think people forget that, even though Arizona did just win, 90% of the football they played has looked pretty bad. And for that reason, I'm going to take the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm the contrarian here. Yes, you're all very correct. 90% of the football Arizona's played has not looked good, but the last 10% that they played looked really good, and that's the kind of thing that can turn a team around. And you can ride for a little while as that wave. So, it should be a toss up, but I'm gonna take Arizona and say that they carry the momentum.
Fair enough.
First half team.
That's right. Packers, Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. Packers, no more Devontae Adams. Tampa Bay, no Mike Evans this week. We already mentioned the wide receiver carousel that is currently Tampa Bay. Tom Brady has an injured throwing ring finger and reports out of practice where that even though he said he felt good, the ball didn't really look that good coming out of his hands. So definitely one to monitor and might be too early to really call. But it just always feels like Tom Brady has had Aaron Rodgers' number, and I just don't see that changing because the Buccaneers' defense is very good.
I'm going to be contrarian again. I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's a little bit of, uh, knowledge bias since I just came off watching Sunday Night Football where Green Bay looked dominant, and of course it was against a horrible Chicago roster.
Not
But
to
just
be
hearing,
forgotten.
Tampa Bay is signing Coleslaw Beasley off of, off of free agency, out of free agency, and Brady's got an injury, and Rodgers just looked dominant. Aaron Jones looked like an absolute monster. And pair that with AJ Dillon. The Green Bay offense just looks really efficient. Yes, Tampa Bay has a very good defense. It's going to be a lot harder to score points, but all things for me point to Green Bay. Should be a good one though.
I tend to agree with the great Skip Bayless on this, and there's one man in sports you just do not bet against, and that would be Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. And
Fair
so I will be riding with none other than Tampa Tom and his 3 guys from Tallahassee.
If all of these things hold true as we've predicted them to be, the Lions would be in sole first place of the NFC North through 3 weeks.
I don't believe that's happened in the history of the current division.
I say, when's the last time have they ever actually held sole possession of first?
No,
Wow.
have they held it or have they ever won it?
No, have they held it even?
Ooh.
Like, when's the last time they held it?
I can't recall.
Well, while I Google that, you guys can talk about the toilet bowl game of the week, the Falcons and the Seahawks.
No. What are we going to talk about that, Bobby? I mean, it's going to take Derek longer to Google this than it is for us to talk about this.
I mean, I guess I'm going to ride Atlanta just because they did look hot kind of against the Rams. And that's, I know they ended up blowing it, but I don't know. Geno Smith, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. I at least liked watching. Like Marcus Mariota kind of.
Right back, Bobby.
I at least kind of like Marcus Mariota. Like, I don't know. I've always been very intrigued by him. Well, I need it for my fantasy team, but we haven't seen it yet. But I guess Atlanta in a toss-up.
No, I'm actually with you on that. I think Geno Smith was fun to listen to after beating Denver, and I will remember that for the whole season at least. But I think that was Seattle's Super Bowl. They looked really rough last week, and Atlanta's looked actually halfway decent in both of their games so far, like you said. And I think they have even more potential because they haven't even been getting the ball to their best player. So, I'm going to go with Atlanta. It is a toilet bowl, but give me Atlanta.
Hey, 3 for 3 here. I'm also going to take Atlanta. I don't know if you guys saw, but Geno Smith is actually attempting to trademark. They wrote me off, but I didn't write
Is he
back.
really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a legendary move. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, do you guys have a guess as to when the last time the Lions were in sole possession of first place? It's actually more recent than you think.
2016.
Dennis?
I don't know the year. I was going to say the year that you guys lost the wild card playoff game against Dallas. It was like 2014.
2019. A measly 3 years ago. The Lions were 2-0-1. It was the year that they tied Arizona in week 1. The Lions were 2-0-1. The Packers were 3-1. The Vikings were 2-1, and the Bears were 2-1. It was the only division in the NFL that did not have a losing team.
And the Lions were at the top of it. That's amazing. Wow.
So that's
the stat.
And then we lost to the Chiefs in a heartbreaker in week 4, and then we never recovered, unfortunately.
I remember that game because that was one that you guys actually should have won, and then it would have been like, oh my gosh, we're a really good team, and then it just never went after that.
Correct.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then
you get all kinds of fun stats here at GTT.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at that.
We think about the hard-hitting questions and bring the hard-hitting facts. That's just what we do. And then the Monday night game, an absolute snooze fest. Cowboys, Giants in New Jersey. I mean, this game is a toss-up. I mean, and I said it earlier before, but in the truest sense of the word, this game is the toss-up. The Giants are 2-0 against, a Titans team that has looked terrible and a Panthers team that is definitively terrible. And then you got the Cowboys, who Cooper Rush beats the Bengals, and Dak Prescott was horrible against Tampa Bay. I don't know what to think. Is Saquon back? Is Daniel Jones going to be good enough? But something about me, I've got to pull for Cooper Rush. I hate it, but I cannot see the Giants go 3-0. Not when the Lions, I think, have a chance to be playoff contenders. We can't have the Giants, like you mentioned in week 1, Bob. We can't have the Giants picking up games against teams they're not supposed to be beating. So rooting for my heart with this one, in that we just can't have the Giants winning games. Give me the Cowboys.
I honestly have no idea what to do with this one. I'm kind of with you. It feels like in many ways, a toss-up, but I am with you on it as well. I at this point, we already lost to Dallas, so let them have some success and make us look a little bit better. Cooper Rush obviously kind of put that boy in my corner and pull for him. And the Giants there's the Daniel Jones 3-0. That's gross. So, yeah. And I also don't like Dallas, so this is not really one that is overly intriguing to me, but sure, I'll take the Cowboys.
3 for 3. I'm also taking the Cowboys just because, quite simply, I don't think Daniel Jones can get a team to 3-0.
4 words, Bob?
4 words on the matter?
4 words?
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah.
How about them Cowboys?
I ain't going that far.
I thought that's what you were referring to. How about them?
Yep,
no, I can't do that.
But yeah, that'll wrap it up for our NFL preview. It'll be interesting to see how things shake out and to see, how many of our predictions go right. There's a lot of home underdogs this week. I feel like there's 1, a lot of home underdogs, and 2, a lot of home teams on upset alert. Like, this just feels like a week where the road teams are gonna thrive. You've got Buffalo's a road team.
Cincy, baby.
Cincy, Vegas, Baltimore, New Orleans, Detroit, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Houston, LA, Jacksonville, Green Bay, Atlanta, Dallas, and San Francisco are all the road teams. And I could see the large majority of them picking up wins. So very interesting week 3 for NFL football. Since we've already done garbage time takes right bench baller segment, I guess we'll jump into the winners and losers and sort of do a little bit of a flip-flop. Plenty of them to go around, as there usually is. Dennis, how about you start us off with your winner and loser of the week?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My winner is anyone who had Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle in fantasy football. Because, I mean, absolutely dominated. Or Lamar. You could throw Lamar in there. Stephon Diggs, also a very good week. But for me, just the fact that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both produced, because a lot of people had that debate going into the season, is, should I be riding with Tyreek Hill, the new guy who, is he going to be good? Is he going to have, chemistry with Tua? And then Jalen Waddle, who was obviously really good last year and hoped to continue his campaign. And they both went off. I mean, Tyreek had 37.5 half PPR points, 35.6 for Waddle. So they both had multiple touchdowns, over 100-something yards. It was incredibly impressive. If you had either of those dudes, you were very happy come Sunday afternoon, that's for sure. So that's my winner for the week.
Bob, your winner?
Kind of an unlikely one, but I think I've got to go with my winner being the Cleveland Browns. In a really strange turn of events, this team looks like it's actually going to have a chance to stay afloat in the division with Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback in the interim. I mean, they just beat Pittsburgh. The Bengals are...
They lost to the Jets. They lost to the Joe Flacco Jets.
I get that. But I'm talking about in their division. And in their division, we've got the Steelers, who they just beat, Cincinnati, who hasn't won a game, and the Ravens, who look good, but they also just lost a heartbreaker in this past week as well, a game that they should have had in the bag but just couldn't close out. So, I mean, when you look at that situation, I gotta say that Cleveland, if they can keep staying afloat, maybe, just maybe, we could see something of a race down here in the back half of the season.
Hey, I mean, Cleveland fans are going to wake up Friday morning, number one in the division.
That's valid.
They
Absolutely.
will. Yeah, and then my winner, let me pull up my notes here. Shoot, it's not in there. Okay. My winner, there's a couple of them. But it's got to be the Detroit Pistons. We talked about it earlier, but I mean, for Troy Weaver to pull that off,
bag of chips,
and get the Pistons' biggest need this offseason was a reliable three-point shooter on the wing who could stretch the floor and space it for Cade and Jaden.
Preferably a veteran.
Correct. And he's no scrub. And like we said, like 40% from three, dude's a sniper in the corner. And those are the type of little moves that are what, take a team progressively to the next level. So, Troy Weaver, I don't think that man does anything but catch fat dubs. I remember when he traded Jeremy Grant, and I was like, this one feels like Troy Weaver lost, and then he fleeced the Knicks in 2 trades back to back, and he just doesn't take losses. So the Detroit Pistons and Pistons fans, they're my winner, because that's a big trade for a team that wants to be in playoff contention. Because at some point the young core needs to see wins, and that's the type of move that gets you wins. Dennis, you're a loser.
Yeah, speaking of losing, my loser, I don't know if you guys saw this story, Greg Norman. There's a really good article written in Golf Digest. Go check it out. Greg Norman was, I believe this was earlier today or maybe yesterday, lobbying Congress that the PGA Tour that is, was in violation of some anti-competitive law that he found or something like that. And basically his visit did not go very well. He was basically shut down. And a lot of the quotes, I pulled a couple of quotes that I thought were really good. Some members of Congress saying his visit was basically nothing but propaganda, a massive waste of our time, and my favorite one, which was this, in reference to Greg Norman's visit to Congress, nothing more than PR for Saudi Arabia. So I was happy to hear that. And we don't have to go 9 rounds, but Greg Norman's my loser. Sounds like he went in there with some pretty high hopes and expectations, trying to play some hardball with Congress to bring down the PGA Tour, and it just didn't work.
That is a fat L. R.I.P. Greg Norman. Bob, your loser.
Loser of the week: Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. Finger injury to everybody that he holds near and dear to his heart. All his wide receivers are down. Line looks banged up. Just
Off the field issues.
Really can't catch a break, it seems like. And what's to add insult to injury, you got to play the Packers next week. So really no rest for the wicked there. And that's going to be a dogfight. But I mean, we also, Derek and I said we have faith in him. We do, but he's definitely going to have to do it the hard way. I think there's no doubt about it.
Not to mention his supermodel wife is very upset with him for coming out of retirement.
Correct.
Yeah. And my loser of the week, I don't know if we ever, really made a stipulation that our loser has to be sports related. So we'll see what we feel for this week, and maybe we can come back. Maybe Bob already knows where I'm going with this. Adam Levine. Adam Levine, fat loser this week. Dude was outed for being in, Instagram models' DMs, alleged affairs, allegedly tried to name one of his children after one of the models he was talking to. And he also has a supermodel wife. I mean, Adam Levine has like the pickup game of like a middle school Reddit user. I don't know if you guys saw some of like the DMs, but I
Didn't
mean,
read through it. No.
Let's
no,
just say,
I didn't.
Derek, the
Not sure.
City Boys are down horrendous after Adam Levine got loose on Instagram. Not a good look.
I mean, just what I mean, Bob. Some of the lines. I mean,
vomit inducing.
they were so cringeworthy, and this is a family podcast, a good Christian podcast, and some of the words that Adam Levine was uttering aren't really repeatable on here. So if you want to find them, you can Google them yourself. But they were ultimate cringe. And I saw a tweet that was like, Doc Rivers, Ime Udoka, and Adam Levine coordinating their deviant behavior. Because Doc Rivers, if we would have started winners and losers 3 weeks ago, Doc Rivers would have been on there. Did you guys hear about what Doc Rivers was doing?
No, I saw all that. Definitely, not suitable for the family-friendly podcast. But yes, I did see that.
People got to realize your likes are public. So for all you out there, remember that the things you like on Twitter, people can find those. But yeah, Adam Levine, big time loser. I mean, come on, you're the front man for Maroon 5 and those were the pickup lines he was using? Ultimate cringe. Any other honorable mentions? I've got a couple. Joey Sly, honorable mention for loser. Me and Bob picked up on that right away, missing the extra point in the Lions Commanders game.
Yep.
Herm Edwards getting fired on the field after losing to Eastern Michigan. That was another one I had. Any other ones? Oh, Hunter Renfrow,
Yep.
big time loser.
Yep.
Not only did he fumble on back-to-back receptions, but on the second one, dude got absolutely lit up by his former teammate Isaiah Simmons, and then fumble recovery the other way for a tub, and the Raiders lost that game. Tough week. Ime Udoka, obvious loser.
Yeah.
Any other ones you guys can think of?
Well, I'm not coming up with anything on the top of my head. If I
Bengals offensive
next week, I'll have to
line?
come prepared with some honorable mentions. No, not the Bengals offensive line. No,
Dennis,
stop that. We already went through this.
Number one worst team in the league in sacks allowed, leading the league with 13. The Saints are second with 10.
I got a good one.
No, I know. That's what we talked about. I already said that. I already said that we had 13 sacks. It's a ridiculous number of sacks. Some of them are Joe Burrow's fault. Some of them the offensive line's fault. They got to clean it up. That's for sure. But it's been 2 weeks. We'll give it some time.
My honorable mention for the week is Dennis Schroeder, who had to re-sign with the Lakers after fumbling Bag City. Now he's signing for like $2 million when he could have had like $20 million. So, yeah.
Great call there. Yep, that was one I remember that news, but forgot to write it down. So, yeah, one of the all-time bag fumbles. Like, that's up there when Nerlens Noel declined a massive contract extension with the Mavs because his agent told him he could get more money, and then dude had to sign for like the vet minimum. So yeah, definitely Thanos verbal meme. You could not live with your failure, and where did that lead you? Back to the Lakers. So yeah, pretty good set of winners and losers this week. Also one last loser, my uncle, who benched both Lamar Jackson and Jalen Waddle in fantasy football last week.
That's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. Rip, man. That's tough.
Yeah. But yeah. All right, Bob. Before we get into everyone's favorite segment, Garbage Time Takes Your Money, and see what you've got for us, I'll recap last week's predictions. Giants-Panthers was last week. Bob gave us an absolute doozy. The line was Giants minus 1.5 at the time of recording, over under at 43.5. That game ended up being a 19-16 victory for the New York Giants. And so the under hit rather comfortably. And Bobby and Dennis both took the Giants in the over. And so they went 1-2. And yours truly went 0 for 2. So 2 out of 3 weeks for me going 0 for 2. NFL's been rough. I took the Panthers in the over. And if it was 3.5, I would have nailed it. But yeah, tough one. Hopefully Bob hasn't. Bob, if you pick the Falcons and the Seahawks, I'm going to be very upset.
Man, that's gonna be upsetting.
No. Come on now. It's even better than that. When in doubt, we're gonna go back to a reliable, none other than Monday Night Football, folks. The Dallas Cowboys and the New York Football Giants. This game, Monday night, playing a Giants home game. Over under 39.5 points in this debacle of a fiasco. And the New York Giants are a 1-point favorite over the Dallas Cowboys. +1, or you can get the Cowboys at a point, or you can get the Giants at a point. Basically just a money line pick at this point. Dennis, can I get your thoughts?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I guess I got to go with Dallas. It does feel like a toss-up. The line seems pretty good, but yeah, I mean, I don't even worry about the point. I guess just give me the Cowboys, and then man, that's a good over/under line at 39.5. I was gonna say under with this game. It felt sloppy, but 39.5 also not overly difficult to get to. But I will say, Dallas coming off of 2017, so that's under. New York coming off of 1916, I believe, so that's under. We'll follow the trend and say under, and then Dallas.
I'm also taking the Cowboys in the under. I think the Cowboys, like they did last week, are going to script, a solid 3, 4, 5 drives to get as many points as they can, and then just hold on for dear life on the backs of their defense. Worked last week. I don't think the Giants are as good as the Bengals, and so I think that's how it works out. I realized that there's an issue with last week's predictions. It says that I took the Giants in the over and that Dennis took the Panthers in the over. I feel like that's not right. I thought I had taken the Panthers and Dennis had taken the Giants. So I'm gonna have to review.
They're gonna give me some replay review.
It's time to check the tape. All right,
we'll
have to check the tape.
I need to review the tapes because I was like, I took the Giants to cover and Dennis didn't, because I could have sworn you two were on the same wavelength last week. So I'm gonna look that up while Bob gives his takes on another horrible game. Thanks for that, Bob. But while I review the tapes, Bob, go ahead and tell us what you got.
You see, the thing is that two people went in front of me and they took the pick that I was going to make. So, you know what? I'm gonna spice it up just a little bit. I'm gonna say that they get to 40 points somehow. 21-20 ball game. Dallas Cowboys. Or 22-20. There you go. Then I can get my. Or then
right,
we can
just,
be outside
just
the point
over.
margin. We get outside the point margin. Yeah,
just squeaking over.
Just squeaking
Beautiful.
over. And we're somehow in the clear. But no, see, here's the thing: you can't pick. Like, I gotta find games that are gonna be, tough. I feel like I'm doing a good job finding games that are like nobody would touch with a 20-foot pole and then making us bet.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good strategy. I love it. Derek, do we have a decision from the tapes in New York?
We do. New York has ruled that the spreadsheet was wrong and my gut instinct was right. I did take the Panthers and the over, and you took the Giants in the over, so I just switched them accidentally on the spreadsheet. But yes, so Dennis, like I thought, you took the Giants. So Bob, you took the Cowboys in what?
I took the Cowboys in the over because I was guilted into a different pick than my two co-hosts.
Is life too short to bet the under, Bob?
22-20.
22-20.
He's just barely
Absolute
getting
corn.
there. He's just literally just getting over.
Is it a Giants missed field goal? Is that how this game ends?
Brett Maher.
Brett Maher sticks from
From
30.
down 2019.
From 37.
Okay.
Oh,
Cooper Rush
if that
just
happens, man.
He does just enough to get him into field goal range. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. As always, thanks so much for watching. Bob, do your thing.
At Garbage Time Takes on Twitter. At Garbage Time Takes on Instagram. And thank you guys for all the support on our recent videos and our social media pages. And please feel free to check out our website in the link in the description below. We've got some great articles on there as well that I think you guys would love.
Yeah. Thanks again, as always. Things to look out for in the sports world. Aaron Judge. I imagine he'll hit 62 in between the time we record our next pod. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for the Lions come Monday morning being top of the NFC North, if all things go according to plan. But yeah, again, like Bob said, thanks so much for watching. See if we can push this video to 50 views. We're on the road to, 25, 50 subs. Just keep pushing up and up. And, as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. So in 3.
1. Peace.
Peace.